Hi everyone, Magnus here, back today with some more live explained rapid chess. I know I have been gone for the past few days, I was busy, but now I am back. And today we are playing a 2340 FIDE Master from the Czech Republic. Let's go for the Alapin Sicilian, pawn to c3. I do like this opening quite a bit. Idea is we want to put 2 pawns in the center, develop the knight. I develop the knight first because on this d4 move order, often black can simplify the position and get a decent setup. On knight c6, I like bishop to c4, hitting the knight, and on knight b6, I will retreat the bishop to b3. This is theory, because the idea is that knight b6 hits the bishop retreats. If they play c4, my bishop will go back to c2 in this nice square that's been created, shielded by all these pawns here. And this pawn on c4 can be a little bit of a liability in the future and can come under fire with often moves like pawn to b3, like this. So often d4, d5 or d6 is played. It was not this time. I'm just going to castle on g6 and probably play a move like rook e1. It's pretty standard in these positions, just to defend the pawn. Was attacked 2 times here, only defended once by my knight. Now I'm thinking probably just pawn to b3. I want to try and undermine this c4 pawn. Probably develop with knight to a3. And if I can remove this pawn and then play like d4, d5, for example, then I can get a very nice game with a big center. Okay. I think taking makes some sense here, quite a bit of sense. Generally, you want to take in these structures. Queen takes. I could play bishop to a3 going after this e7 pawn, but they do have a knight on c6 that is defending. So probably I'm just going to play simple chess, and I'm going to go for knight to a3, harassing this c4 pawn and trying to win it. Okay. So obviously we're threatening to take with the pawn or take with the knight. Probably I would take with the knight, but I'm assuming they're going to defend it somehow. Maybe knight to a5 could be a good move. On knight to a5 though, I might just capture. So something like knight a5, knight takes c4, knight takes c4, pawn takes, knight takes, and pawn to d4. And I think that, white's doing fine. Black's probably doing fine as well. I'm going to try and play a4, bishop a3, go after this e-pawn and the queen on this diagonal. There's a lot of juicy, strong pieces that could be vulnerable on this diagonal if the bishop does get to a3. So that all looks pretty good. Equally, there might be something weird with knight a4, and okay, so taking with the pawn is pretty standard here. You want to try and open up this rook line, pressure the a pawn in the future. I like pawn d4. Pawn d4 is probably what I'm going to play. Also, I might just throw in h3. But I also think h3, potentially bishop f3 takes knight here, and the knight gets to d3 could be annoying. Even if I do win this pawn, probably not worth it. So I think I'm going to play this move, pawn to d4 while I still can. e5 makes some sense. I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to do on e5 just yet. But okay, we're going to see it. e5, I guess I can take. Could push. I could also play knight b5, hit the queen. If the queen were to move here, I have c4, d5. So knight b5. Also, there's some weird tactics with like queen e6, like knight c7, d5. Might be a thing. Maybe. Okay, let's first calculate the capture. Takes. I think they've probably got to take this way. So we'll see like takes, bishop takes, don't want to get into the pin. On knight takes, I would take, and then I guess they would take my bishop. I would take, they would take back in the center. And this position doesn't look great. Doesn't look terrible, but it's probably not what I want. Okay, what about knight c4? No, knight c4 is no good. Knight c4, they just trade and then they'll capture this guy. d5, sack the pawn, knight c4. There's knight c3, that's no good. Okay, let's go back to knight b5. Queen here. Seems to solve a lot of their problems, unfortunately. But wait a minute. h3 takes, knight b5, hits the queen, hits the pawn. Let's say queen d7, takes, knight takes, queen takes, bishop e3. That looks like a fairly decent solution. There might be queen takes a1, rook a1, bishop a1, queen b7. It looks okay. Let's go knight b5. A little bit unsure. There might be some tricks. I mean, queen e6 is knight c7. Queen d5 also knight c7. Yeah, I think queen d7 is basically the only move. Queen d8. There is also the potential, like after the queen moves somewhere, I could capture. That actually makes more sense because now this a7 pawn's under fire. So let's say queen d7 captures. Okay, so queen d7 is on the board. But then takes. Queen takes, bishop takes, takes, knight takes. This pawn is loose, this pawn's defended. I actually think this looks pretty good. Let's go for it. Queens now see each other. And technically, this pawn is sufficiently defended. At least for the time being. So they go for this. Okay, I guess I'll probably take. Knight takes. Maybe I'll go queen e3. Queen takes, knight takes. Queen e4. Maybe I'll go queen g3 so I'm actually making a threat. The problem is this structure is pretty weak. It's a bit soft. I guess I have to go queen e2 actually because I have to defend my knight. Okay. If I can get bishop e2 c4, I'm better. But the question is, it moves like rook e8. I guess on rook e8, I'll play knight bishop e3 or something. Bishop e3 is a nice move. Consolidates the puts pressure on the diagonal and consolidates threats against the queen. And there's not really any good knight jumps. Like the knight can't really jump forward into my position, as you can see. If the knight jumps over here, I mean this pawn's guarded. So if the knight jumps here, I can just kick it. And then if it goes back, bishop e3, put some pressure on. I actually like my position. Maybe I don't like it, but it's not bad. Okay. Bishop e3 is a counter shot on their knight. And I do like a counter shot. But then again, they'll probably just play knight d5, hits the pawn. Don't like that. So guess I'll just go here. Knight d5 still looks pretty good. Knight d5, bishop b2 maybe. Bishop b2 goes c4. Yeah. Trying to pose their bishop on the long diagonal. I always have queen f1 if they get something nasty. Okay, let's go c4. Opening up my bishop. I can always bring the rook into the center as well. So something like knight b4, it's not a huge problem. I'll just bring my rook. I'm not hugely concerned. I'm threatening that f5, which would win the game. So I'm guessing they're probably going to take on c2. I'll go queen takes. And then maybe knight b5, knight d6. Knight b5, maybe rook take, like trade everything on this square. I mean, white's probably got a small advantage. A bit down on the clock though, so that's a bit risky. Okay, they decide to move out of the way. That's very reasonable. Okay. Bishop c3 is the move I'm inclined to play. Just tries to make some decisions. Ask the knight what it wants to do. Okay, we have the exchange. b5 is a scary move, actually. b5 I'm very concerned about. Maybe rook a1? Takes b4. The knight's getting into d3. This is ugly. It's very ugly, actually. Forgot about that. Probably should have just played like bishop b1 or something. Yeah, bishop b1. That was slightly poor. Or even bishop e4 maybe. Like bishop e4, knight f3. Something like that. That was bad. Oh well. Yeah, I think b5 is what they have to go for. But we'll see if they do. They're taking a long think. A very long think. I guess on b5, maybe bishop b4 is what they're thinking so long about. Because bishop e4 here, I have c5. But then they could just go a5. But then knight b5 hits the queen. You know what? That's fair enough. I can see why they're taking a think. Looks a little bit crazy. A little bit crazy. Here. Then what? No, they can't because that's covered. So I guess e7. But then this is under fire. Maybe f4. Yeah, I can see. I can see why they would be a little bit hesitant about b5, bishop b4. So something like b5, bishop b4, rook d8, c5, a5, knight b5, right? Where does the queen go? Guess queen b7 is a skewer. But then knight d6. Queen takes, rook takes. Get 2 pieces for a rook and a pawn. They decide not to go for it. Interesting. Okay, you just got to make some fast moves, I reckon. I'm thinking maybe I can route my knight over here. Try and get some exchanges, potentially of the rooks. B5, I'm less concerned about now, because I can start liquidating some pieces. So I take with the queen, maybe? No, I take with the rook. Still b5. Hmm. I mean, they have to go for it, right? No. That's really weird. Okay. I really want to go for this, but the problem is they have knight f3 and they win my knight. I mean, if it's just a trade, but I don't like it as a trade. Okay, let's try and improve my knight. I'll put it on the e4 square. Get some exchanges. I'm going to play h3 for some luft. Don't want to get my king back ranked. Now they go b5. Okay. Now when we're exchanging all of the pieces, they want to go b5. Fine. Knight f1 guards the pawn. Gonna go g3, consolidate. Put my knight on e3. And it's a pretty dry position. Looks drawish, but I'm up on the clock. So I've definitely got a good shot. Okay, let's play this, get this nice little structure. All the dark squares covered. If they have a dark squared bishop, you want to try and put your pawns on the dark squares, just like this, around the king. That way they don't really have a way in to break through. And plus, after g3 for starters, my knight's covering it. But when my knight moves, if they ever sack, if they ever sack, I can put my knight on g2, guards the pawn, guards the king, and that fianchettoed knight, funnily enough, is a fantastic defender of the king versus a queen, because it will guard all of the dark squared infiltrations. Okay, so they want bishop d4. That much is clear. I'm going to set up the protected barrier. Obviously, they can't do this. Put my queen on f3, which guards the pawn. Now let's get the king up. And I'm going to try and get my knight into the game, potentially over to g5. Because now my queen and my king should be pretty safe, just as they are. There's no real way to attack with these pieces. But I can start to harass their king, and with 14 seconds it's just over. There's no real surviving this one. Okay, bring in the knight. Plus, there's even some like cheap, sneaky forks potentially. Like if their queen were to have gone to this square, for example. Wait. No, it'd be quite hard. Actually, if their queen went to this square, there'd be like a sack, and I'd win the queen. That's what I was trying to point out. Okay. So if you're actually trying to win this game, probably you want to keep the queens on. But I mean, am I trying to win this? Queen d3? Nah, I'm probably just going to... This is like objectively a draw. But white's the only one playing for stuff with his potential pawn weakness, which we're going to go after. But they do flag before I can really get anything going. But yeah, good game to my opponent. I think it was pretty equal most of the game. Yeah, so as you guys can see, a pretty balanced game here. Both around 96 accuracy. Not a whole lot happened, unfortunately. I guess if both sides do play a decent game, then you do just get a draw. Maybe a couple chances were missed here and there. So let's take a look and see if we could have pressed more and maybe what they should have done as well. So we do get this Alapin setup. C3 kicks the knight, kick the knight with e5. And I like to develop this way because let me just show you guys for a second. Black can actually equalize pretty quickly if you go for this move pawn to d4. The simplest is just to go for something like takes, takes, and d6. This line is super annoying. Let's say you go knight c3. This is already bad because of this line. You cannot guard your structure and development's quite hard. They'll trade queens and you have weaknesses and it is worse. And let's say you play knight f3. They can trade or just play knight c6. Knight c6 is pretty straightforward, but even just taking on e5 is actually fast liquidation, I find, for black. You just play like this, and then after the move bishop c4, which is really the only way to try and play for an advantage, there's this quite annoying move, knight d to b4. And basically the idea is that this hits the c2 pawn, and if you were to trade queens, there's knight captures, and the c2 square is basically under fire. You have to play something like knight a3. And white just gets an unpleasant game without really anything going on. And there's not a super easy way to get out of this, because let's say you play your bishop to c4, knight goes to b6, bishop b3, once again, d takes e5, and you're having an annoying time. Like, it's just no fun. e6 here, like, takes, and once again, white's just a little bit worse. So for this reason, I like knight to f3 first, before you try and do anything in the center, and playing for bishop c4. And I quite enjoy these positions in the Stoltz attack. It's pretty standard to bring your rook to the e-file, because at some point they're going to have to push their d-pawn, and that means that the e-file is going to become semi-open, and you get a chance to start harassing them down the center. I thought b3 is a pretty standard move, but I guess d4 makes some sense here, because they kind of have to take on c3. You get your queen into the game, and I guess you're getting fast development, bishop f4 and knight c4, something like that. And if they ever want to break out, then I guess you're just doing this. Takes, takes, takes. And yeah, I mean, white's just slightly better. Supposedly, Engine says you can kick out their knight, and you're just playing against this d6 pawn with a little advantage, and that does look quite nice. I'll agree with that. But after b3, d6, takes, knight a3, we do have a pretty equal game. d4 is a mistake. h3 should have been played. I was concerned about takes, and knight e5. And after queen b7, I was just scared of knight d3. But it's nothing to be scared of because of queen e7. And after queen e7, it looks like the rook's hanging, but then the queen's also hanging. And then after this exchange, I guess their knight is going to be removed, and they're down 2 pawns. White would win the game. So I should have played this move h3. I was just concerned about them getting an outpost. Turns out knight b5 was pretty much the only move to try and play for an equal game. Wow, so I should have gone queen d7. Was slightly better, and GF. This doesn't look good. This does not look good. I still think I'm fairly happy with what I did with queen takes and queen e2. Have to play that to guard the knight. Knight comes to the middle, and bishop to b2. Only move to consolidate the game. And you know what? This position is fine. But yes, Engine agrees that, like I said earlier on, should have played bishop to e4 and knight to f3 to try and get the bishop pairs consolidated. So something like here, knight f3, takes. Wait, this is bad? Oh, because of knight d3. So I guess there's another approach. Engine just wants g3 and the bishop to go to g2. The engine's up to some weird stuff, but bishop e4 I think made sense as a move. And yeah, after queen c2, I was quite concerned about b5. But the engine is agreeing that bishop to b4, rook f e8, c5, a5, knight b5. This line is good for white, but also is now saying that knight g4, knight f3, it's equal. a5, trade, and I guess just bishop d2. Yeah, but it wasn't that bad. b5 was never really terrible for white. Instead of taking with the queen, apparently I should take with the knight, of course. Then I have loads of pressure on this guy. Yeah, I missed that. Okay. Rook f8. Rook d5. Oh, wow, because of course I was thinking there might be there's knight f3 here. Ah, but the knight defends the rook. Very nice. Very, very nice. Well done, engine. And after this, the game is dead. This is a pure draw. Exchanging the queens. And, like, black apparently could be better. I'm not buying it. In a quick game, I mean, like, there's so much to harass here. Something like f5 or even f6. And I guess now the knight can go and put some pressure on these pawns. Nevertheless, this never came to happen because my opponent lost on time. And it is always nice to get a title player win. FIDE Master is no walk in the park. So if you guys did enjoy this video and get some inspiration for the Alapin Sicilian, please do consider liking and subscribing. That'd be very appreciated. And as always, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.